back to the Worth Loving Podcast. I'm your host, Keana W. Mitchell, and as always, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me today. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge something that's very important. So if you've ever found yourself looking back on a relationship and thinking, the signs were there, why didn't I see them? I want you to know that you are not alone, because many of us have experienced relationships that felt wonderful in the beginning, only to discover later that the person we trusted wasn't really emotionally safe. Believe me, I have been there, and so I totally resonate with what we're talking about today. And when that happens, it is easy to blame ourselves. So we'll tell ourselves things like, we should have known better. We wonder how we missed the red flags. We question our judgment. But here's what I want you to know today. Most emotionally unsafe people don't introduce themselves as emotionally unsafe. They don't have a sign over their head. They don't wear a t-shirt that says on the back, emotionally unsafe. That's not how they work up. They don't show up on the first date and say, hey, hi, I'm emotionally unavailable. I avoid accountability and I create chaos in relationships. And I also gaslight. Nobody does that. Nobody says that. Instead, these patterns reveal themselves over time. So today's episode is about learning how to identify these patterns before you become emotionally invested. Because emotionally unsafe people can get you invested really quickly, which is why it's important to slow the relationship down. Emotional safety isn't something we talk about nearly enough, and I wish we spent more time talking about it, because we spend so much time talking about chemistry, attraction, compatibility, and communication, but not enough time talking about whether someone is emotionally safe enough to even build a relationship with. So, as always, I want to remind you that this podcast is trauma-informed. We aren't here to shame ourselves for the choices we made. We are here to understand our patterns, learn from them, which is most important, and grow with compassion. So whether you're dating, healing from a past relationship, or simply wanting to make wiser choices moving forward, today's conversation is for you. But before we jump into today's topic, let's take a minute to revisit last week's episode of the podcast. So in last week's episode of the podcast, we talked about why low self-worth attracts toxic partners and how to break the cycle. So in that conversation, we explored something that many people struggle to understand, and that is that toxic relationships are rarely about a lack of intelligence. They're often connected to unresolved wounds, attachment patterns, and beliefs that we hold about ourselves. We discussed how low self-worth can make us vulnerable to partners who offer inconsistency instead of stability, confusion instead of clarity, and validation instead of genuine love. We talked about how people who question their own value often ignore red flags because they're afraid of losing the connection. They settle for crumbs because they don't fully understand that they deserve the whole meal. They tolerate behavior that hurts them because part of them feels grateful simply just to be chosen. We also explored trauma bonding, which is the fear of abandonment, weak boundaries, and the tendency to seek validation from people who are emotionally unavailable. Most importantly, though, and this is the part I want you guys to take away, we talked about healing. We talked about how learning to see ourselves through the lens of worth rather than shame. We talked about practicing self-compassion. We talked about understanding that the goal isn't to become perfect before entering a relationship. The goal is to become aware enough to choose differently. And that's exactly where today's episode pick up. Because once we begin rebuilding our self-worth, we need another skill. We need to be able to have the ability to recognize emotionally unsafe people before we become attached, before we get connected to them. Because self-worth helps us believe we deserve better. And when we deserve better, we treat ourselves better, and we also choose better. But discernment is also going to help us recognize when something isn't healthy. It's going to help us to accept that gut feeling and recognize, this doesn't feel right, and understand that if something doesn't feel right, you have the right to walk away. So today we're going to talk about the warning signs, the patterns, and the behavior that can help you identify emotionally unsafe people early on in the relationship before you become connected to them or fall for them. Before we dive back into today's conversation, I want to take a minute to personally invite you into something very special, into my You Are Worth Loving signature coaching program. This is my 12-week trauma-informed coaching experience designed to help you break unhealthy patterns, rebuild your self-worth, and create emotionally safe relationships that actually feel good for your soul. If you've been listening to the Worth Loving podcast and thinking, I'm ready for deeper support, This is your next step. Inside the program, we work together one-on-one to help you reconnect with your voice, your boundaries, and your confidence so you can stop settling for relationships that drain you and start choosing ones that honor you. I'm only taking 3 clients for the month of May because I honestly want to give each person the time, energy, and care they deserve. So, if you've been waiting for a sign to start your healing journey, this is it. Click the Stand Store link in the show notes to apply or learn more. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are worthy of love, and you are worthy of relationships that feel safe, healthy, and whole. Now, let's get back to today's episode. So let's start by defining what we mean when we talk about emotional safety. An emotionally safe person is someone whose actions create trust, consistency, accountability, and security. They may not be perfect, but they create an environment where you feel respected, heard, and emotionally protected. An emotionally unsafe person does the opposite. Now, I want to be careful here. Emotionally unsafe people doesn't automatically mean that they're abusive. It means that the person's patterns consistently create confusion, instability, anxiety, fear, or emotional harm in relationships. One of the things psychologist Dr. Henry Cloud teaches is that trust is built through patterns over time, not through words, intentions, or promises. And I think that's important because emotionally unsafe people often sound great. They know exactly what to say. They talk about wanting a healthy relationship. They tell you they care. They promise they're different. But emotional safety isn't measured by promises. It's measured by behavior. So, for example, someone may tell you that communication is important while disappearing for days at a time. Someone may tell you they value honesty while avoiding difficult conversations. Someone may say they respect your feelings while repeatedly dismissing them. The question isn't, what are they saying? The question is, what patterns are they showing me? One of the biggest mistakes many of us make is falling in love with someone's potential instead of paying attention to their behavior. We become attached to who they could be. We become invested in who they might become. Meanwhile, their behavior is telling us exactly who they are right now. And that's why learning to recognize emotional safety and emotional unsafety is one of the most important relationship skills you can develop. So, sign number 1 would be that their words and their actions don't match. The first sign of an emotionally unsafe person is disconnection between their words and actions. So they'll say one thing, but consistently do another thing. Now, everybody occasionally makes mistakes, okay? We all have moments when our behavior falls short of our intentions. But that's not what I'm talking about. Remember, we're talking about patterns, okay? So, for example, they may tell you they care about you, but they consistently make you feel like you're not a priority. They say they want a relationship, but their behavior suggests they just want convenience. They promise they'll call, but they rarely ever follow through. They'll talk about commitment while acting emotionally unavailable. So over time, this creates confusion. And confusion is often one of the biggest signs that someone isn't emotionally safe. Healthy relationships, guys, remember this, they create clarity. Emotionally unsafe relationships create uncertainty. You will find yourself consistently trying to figure out what someone means. You spend more time analyzing their behavior than actually enjoying the relationship. You start to make excuses for them. You tell yourself, oh, they're busy, they're stressed, they're afraid, they've been hurt before. And while some of these things may be true, that doesn't erase the impact of their behavior. One of the questions I often encourage people to ask themselves is this: am I trusting their words or am I trusting their pattern? Because patterns reveal character. Patterns reveal emotional capacity. Patterns reveal readiness. Anyone can make a promise. And anyone can do something that and follow through with it for like a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, right? But we're looking at consistency over time. Not over a week, not over 2 weeks, but consistency over a long span of time. And when a person's words and actions consistently fail to align, that's not something you should overlook. That's information, so pay attention to that information. Other signs of emotional unsafety might include someone who avoids taking accountability for their actions. So in this situation, It would be like you might bring up a concern, but instead of taking accountability, they might blame you, they might become defensive, change the subject, or make you feel guilty for speaking up. Emotionally safe people may not like feedback, but they're willing to hear it, and that is huge. Emotionally unsafe people often make accountability someone else's responsibility. They may say things like, well, if you hadn't done this, then maybe I wouldn't have done that. Things like that. So if someone is not taking accountability and they're avoiding accountability, that may be a sign that they are an emotionally unsafe individual. Second, everything has to happen on their terms. So in this situation, the person decides when communication happens, they decide when affection is offered, they decide when problems get addressed, and you may find yourself constantly adapting to their needs while your own needs go unmet. That would be a sign that the person that you're with may not be an emotionally safe individual. So even though maybe these behaviors may not be abusive, they're emotionally unsafe. And remember, when we talk about our emotions and our mental health, it's important that we are in relationships where we are in emotionally safe spaces and relationships. It's important for our mental health, and it's very, very, very important for a healthy relationship to have an emotional safe foundation in that relationship. Another thing an emotionally unsafe person may do is minimize your feelings. So let's say you share something that hurts you, and if you've heard responses like, oh, you're being too sensitive, you're overreacting, that's not what happened. These are major warning signs, big red flags, like just going off like crazy. Now, this is not an emotionally safe person. Emotionally safe people don't have to agree with you or your feelings to respect them. And finally, I need you to pay attention how you feel around them. Do you feel secure? Do you feel constantly anxious? Do you feel valued? Or do you feel like you're always proving yourself? Researcher Brene Brown often talks about the connection between vulnerability and safety. Healthy relationships create space for us to show up authentically. Unsafe relationships create pressure to perform. So I want you to reflect on these questions, okay? Ask yourself, am I paying attention to patterns instead of promises? Do I feel emotionally safe expressing my needs? Does this relationship bring me peace or confusion? Am I explaining away behaviors that concern me? Or would I want someone I love to be treated this way? These are all good questions to help you kind of navigate and see if you are in a relationship that is emotionally healthy, or if you're in a relationship that is emotionally unsafe. Now, the song we're going to listen to today is called It's Over, and it's from our podcast artist and my alter ego, Emery Rose. The song is about a woman who left an emotionally unsafe relationship and is now happy in an emotionally safe relationship. And this song is, I think, a good reminder that just because you were in an unhealthy relationship or an emotionally unsafe relationship, it doesn't mean that's your fate. It doesn't mean that's what you have to do all the time, because that's not true. You can absolutely leave an unhealthy relationship or an emotionally unsafe relationship and definitely find a good partner, an emotionally safe relationship, an emotionally healthy relationship. So that is pretty much the thing I want you to remember. Just because you may have been in one unhealthy relationship or emotionally unsafe relationship, it doesn't mean that that's what you always have to do. We can definitely choose differently and do things differently. So here is the song, It's Over by Emery Rose.
This relationship is over, so you don't have a reason to call me, try to talk to me, reconnect with me, keep in touch with me. I told you, you and I were through. You can lose my number, forget where I live, I am moving on, and so should you. You can lose my number, forget where I live, I am moving on, and so should this relationship is over. It's over. It's over. It's over. This relationship is over. It's over. It's over. It's over. It's over. When we were together, I had to keep tabs on you, monitor what you did so you wouldn't cheat on me. That was exhausting to say the least. Now I have a man who makes me a priority. You can lose my number,
as we end the podcast today, I want to remind you that you will be able to find all of the songs featured on the podcast for the month of July. They will be available starting Friday on all streaming sites. So what I want you to do is click the artist link in the show notes and follow Emery Rose on Spotify so that you will have access to all of the music for each month, because I do plan to do this monthly. I think this is the best way for us to have the songs available for you guys to listen to without having to go back and listen to the whole podcast if you need a reminder or if you just like the song and wanted to hear it again. So I plan to each month drop the 4 songs, make them available on Spotify that we listen to in the podcast so that you can go back and listen to them. So if you would like to get all of the songs each month whenever they are available, I would love for you to click the artist link in the show notes and follow Emery Rose on Spotify so that you will have monthly access to all of the new music that will be available each month. I also have a free gift available for you today, and that is my free PDF, and it talks about why you keep attracting the same partners. And when I say you, it's just general you, because we all have been there. All of us, myself included, have looked in the mirror and wondered, okay, this is the same relationship I was in before, just a different person. Or this is the same behavior, different person, right? So if you would like to find out why you continue to date the same type of person over and over again in different people, then make sure you click the link below in the show notes. Remember, chemistry may attract you to someone, but emotional safety determines whether a relationship can truly thrive. You deserve relationships where you feel respected, valued, heard, and emotionally safe. And above all, remember this: you are absolutely worth loving. Until next week, have an amazing day and a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.